Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Whitney Claire Riley. As a transformational mentor, Whitney helps you achieve big results. Her work is a little like coaching, a little like spiritual healing, and a little like therapeutic counseling. As a mentor, her focus is on finding each person's unique path to emotional and mental freedom, increasing self-confidence while building a connection with the authentic self. And she assures everyone that it's a fun process. Whitney has 25 years experience positively transforming power struggles, weight issues, oppressive grief, autoimmune disorders, bad habits, anxiety, and financial ceilings. She has condensed her learning into powerful, proven sessions that transform the most difficult situations so that people can let go and start living a better life. Whitney is a mom, wife, author, speaker, certified emotional freedom technique practitioner, and founder of the specific meditation technique. She is proud to have been blessed by the Dalai Lama and to have been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize by a former client. And with that, Whitney, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it seems like our pre-chat was such a long time ago, but yet it was such a short time ago. And I know we spoke over the summer. I believe we met through a mutual podcast guest and podcaster platform. You reached out to me, and voila, here we are today recording. So,
Yeah, and I've been looking forward to this because our pre-chat was so wonderful.
yes, it was, and I think we aligned on so many different levels in terms of how we see the world, how we believe in integrative medicine and the effects that it has on both physical and mental health. And I'm excited to dive deep into a variety of different topics related to that today. So whenever you're ready, we'll get going.
I am ready.
All right. The first question that I would like to ask you is, please tell our listeners about the experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions.
Yeah. I thought a lot about that. And I used to always say there are these three really big things. And when I look at it now, what stands out is actually my choice, the choices I made around these three big things. We tend to look at these moments where life hands us something that's too big, unexpected, you know, loss of identity, relationship, all of these things. And everything gets condensed and we get stuck there and we point to that. And clearly that did play an obvious large part. But it was, when I look back now, it was how I was able to be with the difficult things that really have brought me to be here talking to you and to survive in the only way now that I know looking back. And those three things were going from my normal way of being, normal to me, to like instant panic disorder. It wasn't like a ramp up or it was, I had no idea what was going on. It was very horrible, as I'm sure you and maybe even some of the listeners know. And my heart goes out to anyone struggling with that. That was one. And then both of my parents died early and were sick. And it was a very isolating experience because my age, not really anybody could relate to me. I would hang out with people that in their 80s and 70s and feel comfort. And we had more in common sometimes than my friends. And the third thing was an autoimmune condition that was so painful and disfiguring. And all of these things, evoke the emotions of fear, out of control, the loss of what you thought you knew and how the world was going to go. And then how I dealt with those things, are really what brought me here talking to you.
Autoimmune disorder, panic attacks with no obvious etiology, the loss of your parents at a young age. Any one of those events are life altering. But together, that had to be, I would imagine, particularly as you grew older, those had to become more overwhelming as the impact of those, reinvented itself as you went through your developmental phases of growth.
Yeah. Well, it's 24 was kind of the pivotal year. And what's funny is when I was a little girl, my peers would be like, oh, I can't wait to drive at 16. I can't wait to be 18. I can't wait to be 21. And I always knew, I was like, I can't wait to be 24. And people were like, why? And like, I had this vision, wear red lipstick, high heels, have my own apartment. Like I had this very specific, like, I don't know, I have emerged as my own self. And 24 couldn't have been more different. And that's when the panic attacks came and, my hair fell out. I stopped sleeping. My world closed in because then, when you can't trust your body, you start to associate, it's like the path to agoraphobia, right?
Mhm.
You start to associate everything with why this is happening to me. So I just stopped trusting everybody and shrank. But that was the first one. By the end of 24, my mother had already had, she had Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's, started when I was 18, but because she was so young, it was mismanaged, misdiagnosed, a lot of chaos. But my dad passed away suddenly at the end of 24. Basically, trying to care for her, I think gave him a stroke, Obviously, it's probably not the only factor, but so that was kind of like a radical, like that year was just like, it wasn't not fun, not red lipstick, not the high heels, but it was the kernel of me becoming this person because I took one Zoloft and no shame to pharmaceuticals. I believe lots of people find great comfort on their journey. But
Mhm.
for me, it was as scary as staying stuck for whatever reason. A very bad experience with the one Zoloft. And I went to this clinic, and that was a whole long story to even figure out what was wrong with me and spent money and time and heartache. They gave me like a case of bottles of Zoloft. Like I might have had enough Zoloft for 2 years. And that next morning, I woke up and threw it in the trash. And I did think like I might have to kill myself in order to do the world a favor because who
Mhm.
is going to there's no one to take care of me. My mom is already, needing care. And that was scary looking. Like it's scary to see what it might be like to lose control, right?
Mhm.
Of,
Mhm.
especially as a young person. And I remember going, I don't want to kill myself. Like I had to do it. Um, and I'm making light of it because in that moment, I saw a window, like in my mind's eye, and it was a light. And I went, wait, this is what is here. But maybe this is just a tunnel of darkness and that there's a light. So just keep focusing on that little window you see off in the distance. And really, when I look back, it's that choice that changed everything, and brought all these new ideas and methodologies into my life.
Would you say that light was the start of a spiritual awakening or for you or a jump into creating greater awareness about yourself and about other potential therapeutic interventions other than traditional Western pharmacological medicine that could help you address your issues?
Yes, absolutely. That each time something came my way, at one point I remember thinking maybe I'll just be a swing door for other people. because of my, the traditional kind of ideology that you just referenced had me like in a box where I felt, well, this is the way that it should go. But I was open, but I felt like, I don't know if I can leap over there. Right. Like,
Mhm.
but lo and behold, I mean, I think acknowledging that I was in the middle helped me eventually leap over. But there were definitely so many new ideas that I stayed stuck longer than I had to. And I know at some point maybe, there's a point of us having this conversation, but to make a mini point, it's if you're stuck, if you're there and you're stuck, take a deep breath and try. Even if something fails you, it's worth investing hope or other resources in, because if I hadn't taken those leaps, I can't imagine, you know,
Mhm.
I can't imagine.
And a lot of times we need to take that leap of faith, even if our fear may be greater than our faith at that point, because to stay where we're at, particularly if traditional interventions or things that we're doing aren't working, um, tells us that we need to do something different. But so many times, what you know this, and I'm sure you've encountered this with the individuals that you've worked with.
Mm,
There is such a fear about change because you're leaving something unfamiliar, even though it may be chaotic and those behaviors and experiences are, serving your best purpose. But when individuals make that leap, they say, what the heck was I waiting for? And it opens up so many new doors for them.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
and with individuals like yourself who have had panic disorder, who have had anxiety, the underlying belief is that the world isn't a safe place. There has to be some degree of safety before you can embark and with the fear of change before you can deal with that. Once you're feeling safe, then yeah, I think you can deal with whatever hesitancy you have about change. But for those that don't view the world as a safe place, I would imagine, the thought of changing their behavior has to be a daunting task.
yeah. For me, luckily, I was equally afraid of the idea, this picture of taking this pill that made me feel really not great. And I know it takes a while to get in your system, and I
Hmm.
didn't even give it that opportunity because I had such a radically not okay experience. But the fear actually helped me
Hmm.
in a weird way, right? It's like, well, what is my greatest fear? And then at some point, like just squaring it and going, well, I mean, I'm already here. Might as well
Hmm.
do this, right? But what we all have is our body. And our body is one of the greatest resources. And for whatever reason, in this world of big thinking, and solve the problem, go to school and make up your mind, we have divorced knowing the truth of our body. And I think many practices, meditation included, help us. And in all of that, my mind maybe said, this doesn't make sense, or you're a weirdo, or whatever, which couldn't be further from the truth, right? But I
Hmm.
felt it. My body was like, go, go here, give this a shot, So taking a breath in that fear, and fear is such a motivating sensation that makes us want to
Hmm.
get up and do something, even if it's not the right thing. But if you're able to get in your body and just listen for a minute, it can help you, do the weird thing like tap on meridian points, or whatever might be on your journey for you.
Absolutely. And I think, our body knows the score. And again, I'm
Or
taking that verbatim from Bessel van der Kolk's tremendous book, that the body knows the score. But even if you wake up in the morning and you just kind of just lay in bed for a minute, scan your body, see which parts of your bodies are aching, see what parts of your bodies you think might need a little bit more attention. And that also sets the stage for doing some mindfulness as well, too. First thing in the morning, what is my body telling me I need to do? Because, we talk extensively about the mind-body spirit connection. And we have to listen to our bodies so the other two can go into alignment. Because what our body tells us is going on is going to influence the other two spheres that I mentioned. So, speaking of tapping, this is a nice segue into. I mentioned in the introduction that you are a certified emotional freedom technique practitioner. What is EFT? How does it work? And what have you observed to be its therapeutic effects with the individuals that have requested that specific service from you?
Um, Quickly, it is on the subtle energies of the body, nadis, meridians. Acupuncturists use these same lines.
Yep.
The points of EFT or emotional freedom technique are on these specific points on the body that have vascular bundles on these energetic lines, and they relate generally to organs like stomach meridian, the rib point. Most people don't use the rib point because it's kind of uncomfortable for some people. It's right under the nipple line, about the second rib up, right in the middle. That's related to your liver,
Mhm.
which can be associated with anger, which I think most Americans have a bad relationship with that emotion and many emotions. So it is those points, and you just tap on them in sequence while leaning into your issue. And I'm leaving that open because it is a very forgiving process, and you can literally just rant and tap to the points or dive into traumas, grief, blocked, constricted emotions, and even issues. So you go through those points, and the middle question, like how it actually works, is still up for great debate. There are many researchers really trying to figure out the mechanism, and one is like, you're anchoring your body in a distraction while your emotional mind runs the tape. Um, There are other theories out there. How it works, we're not exactly sure. Now, the outcome generally at the lowest level is basically cortisol and stress hormones will decrease radically. They even did some experiments where they thought, oh, something went terribly wrong because of these numbers based on other traditional therapies. They did it again, got the exact same numbers. So, in the worst case, you're going to lower the stress hormones hijacking your body. But generally, especially if you're working with a practitioner, your outcomes are going to be significant where you change the way the memory impacts your biology. And when you do that, that sort of loop of the emotion creating the thought creating the biology, and where it starts, who cares? You get stuck, right?
Mhm.
The spiraling. You break that loop. And all of a sudden, instead of, you know, glucose running in your blood, your pupils dilated, and you think you're being reasonable, calling somebody or running away or making this radical decision of going somewhere you've said you're never going to go again, right?
Mhm.
When you're hijacked, we're not in our sense of reason, but we feel like we are. You bring reason back on board. You dilate the vessels back to your prefrontal cortex, and all of a sudden you can look at it and go, oh my gosh, it's not a bear. I'm just sad. And it makes sense to be sad.
Now, for those who might not know what the prefrontal cortex
Mm.
regulates, in our decision-making process or in our behavior, can you give us just a brief overview of what the role of the prefrontal cortex is, particularly in the context of EFT?
Sure. It's your highest place of reason. It's where you organize your thoughts. It's the part that can suspend instant gratification because of a bigger goal.
Mhm.
I think the classic case for most like Psych 101 students is Phineas Gage got a railroad tie up through his brain, and he lived. And all of a sudden he became erratic and gambling, impulsive, and just, it changed the way he was able to function in his neurobiology, and make decisions. I think that's like the best example of how we expect most people to live. But really, the nuanced parts are when the limbic system starts to paint the picture, we go for it. The brain, that part doesn't know how to tell time. So if you're attacked as a child in a violent way and you were never able to process that or make sense of that, anything that looks threads into that, and trauma is right fractured, right, and stored in different places, not as a narrative. So any one of those parts can, oh gosh, and then now your limbic brain paints this huge picture that you believe is reality, and you cannot be talked out of it. And most of us try to talk each other. Oh, don't feel like that. It's going to be okay. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this terrible thing happened, but maybe there's some lesson in it. We say really horrible things thinking we're comforting somebody when this is their reality. And you're either going to make them feel alone and suppressed with this reality, or you're going to get in some struggle.
Yep.
And so that prefrontal cortex plays a part by not being able to go, hey, look, that's not actually happening. Or you're not 6 years old anymore. Or we could actually do something different here. And when you tap all of a sudden and bring blood back to that area, this movie that you're a part of starts to be a movie that you can interact with.
One of the things I've discovered in, my past work as an addictions counselor is when individuals' emotions are governing their behavior, they're not making thoughts that are based on on reason. And I would imagine that if they're at a high level of emotional state, and that's governing their behavior, that's got to interfere with functioning in the prefrontal cortex. It just has to. And so I could see automatically what the benefits of EFT would be for somebody who would fit that, that profile. Is there any type of client that EFT is not indicated with?
I have been extremely fortunate, or this is the real number. I would say over 99%. I had one client where he actually was getting benefits, but this client came to me through a psychiatrist because he believed he'd been to groups, he had been to all these different methods, and he would get the books and read the books, and he truly believed that he knew better than everyone else. And I was like, oh, well, EFT can fix, this is early on. And I was like, well, EFT is clearly his path. But even in that path, the part of him that, and if he was having anxiety, like crippling anxiety, was believed that nobody could help him. And I really got handed a lesson that day that, there are some things where a person will control certain methods from coming in. And if he believes he's the only one that could be a part of his salvation and he can't partner or trust anybody, I wasn't going to get a chance. And he did. He kind of blew it up in the middle and just said, this is BS, and walked out. But I don't think that's the normal case. So I've seen hundreds of people in group and in person, and it is remarkable to see their numbers, their levels of distress go down and stay down.
How many average sessions of EFT before you start seeing a positive impact, or is it almost immediate, Whitney?
I would say it's immediate. So I just had a woman, I believe she's about to be 60. She was planning to hang herself. And she came to me and was just anxiety and just a lifetime of all kinds of things, lots of abusing substances, had taken their toll. And after we just even talked on the phone, she was like, oh my gosh, I feel like there's hope. And we did a little bit on the phone, but she came in for her first session and it radically changed her life. But it wasn't, in her words, it wasn't till the third session where she started to believe now she was the person that started to change on the first. And now she's like living, making these incredible decisions, setting boundaries. She has plans to go live in some tropical place. Like she is living the life she's always been wanting to live. And we've had total of 5, 6 sessions. Now, my sessions are 3 hours generally. We don't do surgery and go, there it is. Okay, pack it up, get in your car. I'll see you next week. We're like, okay, it's open. Let's get in there while it's open.
And it's good that you're really not constrained by time or insurance regulations. And a lot of times, practitioners or therapists are constrained are constrained with time because of insurance requirements and everything else. To see the gains that you saw in 6 3-hour sessions with her, you might not see those same gains in 2 hours of therapy that occurs like once a month or a couple times a month. Where it's just either talk therapy or you're doing other types of evidence-based interventions. And I'm not knocking evidence-based interventions, but
No.
sometimes we need the more complementary and holistic approaches to work in conjunction with the evidence-based to see marked changes in both physical health and mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think we're creatures of habit, and it is hard to change. And I think, you're in the educational, you see a lot of information, and it can take sometimes 20, 30, 40, 60 years for something that's proven effective to actually be accepted by the general public or by practitioners. We don't want to change individually, but you put a bunch of us together in a bureaucratic situation, and it is really hard to change strategies.
Yep.
We're constrained by our own limitations as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we're our own worst enemy in terms of the things that we tell ourselves about ourselves that prevent us from achieving our true potential. And if we can modify that self-talk in our head to make it to a point where it's more proactive as opposed to debilitating or limiting,
Right.
I think, you would see marked improvement in individuals' outlook.
Definitely. What is it like the what ifs? The phone's ringing and it's your boss, and you're like, oh, he's gonna or she's gonna find some fault with me, right? We prepare for the worst. My switch was like, when the phone rings, they're gonna offer me a new gig. They're gonna give me a compliment, like we don't know what's gonna happen. So why don't we enjoy it instead of suffer before whatever's gonna happen?
Absolutely. It's all about perspective.
It is.
One of the things I've interpreted from reading information on your website and talking with you during our pre-chat is that you believe it's important to make room for and embrace our emotions. Um, how does doing that improve our physical and mental health and our overall quality of life in general?
Okay. I'm taking this straight from me, not necessarily from the written information out there. I truly believe that embracing our emotions is the way to find that emotional freedom that we seek pretty much in everything we interact with. We're given this beautiful array of emotions in this human existence, and we're taught because of many reasons. And again, I'm not trying to blame anybody, but taught to live within a very small range of even the good ones, right? Even being too happy is not okay. Being too joyous is not okay. So we're kind of in this acceptable taught reason. If you're angry, go to your room and don't come back until you have a smile on your face. But make sure it's not too big, because then you're making me uncomfortable, right? So emotions like, then the guilt and the shame that sometimes is used to control a situation, right? We're taught that emotions are bad or like stay away, don't feel them. And so what happens? You were talking about the addiction and how this prefrontal cortex and emotional brain. So if your body is filled with all these emotions, injustice, something happens and kids generally think the adults are the best. And so the problem is them, but they're not able to work this out emotionally. That can clog an entire lifetime. 33 years of heroin addiction, one EFT session, and the person went to rehab and just recently celebrated 8 years of being sober after 33 years by being able to unpack an emotion from when he was 6 years old. I mean, it wasn't beautiful. Like, it was a hard process. I'm not going to take all that, but it was all of a sudden easier to go, I'm enough to do this.
Mm.
One time, being able to bring those emotions into a place that these emotions are valid and are mine.
I think that's amazing. And also, I remember when I worked in the addictions field, we had considered bringing in a certified acupuncturist to do acupuncture treatments with individuals with addiction, because it's been proven that acupuncture has been beneficial for for addicts' emotional health, and can also lay the groundwork for increasing their chances of long-term sobriety if they kept it up consistently. But in the state's infinite wisdom, they thought that hiring acupuncture to somebody to supervise it for $5,000, I think it might have been a year, was too much money. But then again, when you factor in the cost of pharmaceuticals, it's much more expensive than that. And
Wildly expensive, but somebody benefits.
well, absolutely. But in this case, the benefit would have been for the client, because it would have been a very cost-effective way to maximize treatment results. And down the road, you're saving money, state's saving money, because they can allocate those resources, not on individuals who are coming into treatment multiple times, but for new individuals who need the treatment. And that kind of frees up the resource logjam that we've had since I've been in human services, where there's so many people in the treatment and not enough resources to provide that treatment.
It's unfortunate because it would save lots of money, but also save so many lives, and not just the lives of those struggling with addiction, everyone that person touches, and we're stuck. Recently, I was quite proud of my book and the Me Method, and so I was talking to some researchers, because I've been dying to research this method in those types of population, people with cancer, just young students, right there at the embarking on adulthood, to be able to go in and clean up all this stuff. Anyway, I learned, because I was like, every time I get on a podcast or talk to somebody and they go, oh, it's just, I can't think of the word now, but it's the Wikipedia. Oh, it's pseudoscience. EFT is just this pseudoscience thing. And I know exactly where they got it. And I'm like, well, Wikipedia is an open source. Can we just go in there and change it? And I had started to do that before I had this conversation. He's the head of research for ASAP, which is the American certification for EFT, and also thought field therapy and many other energy psychologies. And a huge proponent of pushing out all the research, gold standard research on EFT and these other energy psychologies. And he said, don't bother. And I was like, why? And he goes, yeah, you can go in there and change it, because we've been doing it for years, and within 12 hours, someone will go in and change it back. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, we just left it. It is important enough to somebody or some entity to change and take away all of the actual real information. So it's weird that people don't have real access to these methodologies. And maybe somebody thinks that it's dangerous, and they're trying to be helpful. I don't want to make it sound like it's as nefarious as it might come across, but it might be. I don't know.
I think the other thing is that, and this all goes about, I think, established belief systems. A lot of individuals are worried, I believe, that if they incorporate a belief that is different than their core belief systems, that they have to abandon their core beliefs, and they don't need to do that. It's more of expansion. I mean, how can acupuncture work with my evidence-based belief in, therapy with cognitive behavioral therapy or solution-focused therapy or motivational interviewing? How can that align? Not how is it antagonistic to the process, but how can it enhance what I already know? How can it enhance what I already believe? And how can it enhance me improving services to the individuals who request services? Because when it's about, Whitney, and you both know this, it's about the client's progress. And we provide whatever resources that client believes that they need or to help them move forward. And if it's complementary practices, if it's evidence-based, if it's a combination of the both, that's where we go. It isn't about which belief system is better, which technique is better. It's what's separately or together is going to work in the best interest of the people that we serve.
Absolutely. I tell my clients, I'm here to guide you. This is not about me. And you cannot break my love and respect for you, no matter what happens. And even if you could, it wouldn't matter. It's about you.
Yep.
And me holding space and helping your journey. So if I say something or do something that you do not agree with, we scrap it. This is about you. And only you, right?
If it becomes about me and not the client, I need to take a look at what's going on within me that's making it about me.
Exactly.
And the other thing that we are obligated to as coaches, as practitioners, is self-awareness and also being aware of our limitations, being aware of when we've lost our objectivity for whatever reason, whether that client awakened a previous an unresolved issue in us,
Right.
or whether we were just taken aback by some client characteristics that we didn't find to be desirable. And that's when we need to step back, talk to a peer support mentor or a supervisor and say, I'm having some trouble with objectivity in this situation. I need to process this with you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So speaking of your book, you've been doing such a great job segueing into any next question that I've had. Tell our listeners about your book. The title of your book is Make Everything Easier, Get What You Want by Healing Human or Hidden Resistance. Tell us about the book. What would you like readers to take away from it? I have to say this as an aside. I mentioned this before we recorded. Your book was published on March 1st, 2024. And March 1st is my daughter Janine's angelversary date. So, yeah, I looked at that and I said, yeah, I mean, people do not come into our life by chance. It's all by pure design. But with that aside, out of the way, tell us about the book and what you want readers to take away from it.
Well, first, I got a little tear in my eye and I got goosebumps all over again. And I would love to take just a little second and send some energy to your daughter and to you.
Thank you.
In her memory and honor of her still being a part of the journey, right?
Oh, yeah, she's been a part of this since probably the day she transitioned, but I didn't realize until about 7 years after she transitioned that she was front and center and was with me all of this time. So, and she's a partner in everything that I do. And, she's the best parts of her are the best parts of me.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for holding space for it.
Yeah. So the book came about as this idea of like, how can we make the processes that we are given accessible to lots of people and have the same giant yield as one-on-one? And with my mentor who worked in kind of the bureaucratic public health with young people struggling, borderline people, and she just was down on it. And she's like, it gets watered down. Anytime you do group work, it gets watered down. And I was like, I know there's a way. And one day, I experienced this lecture about guilt. And so we went through the emotion and went into this experience. And I came out going, oh, It's the emotions. We all have the emotions, and the word is the word, but we all have our unique pathway to our emotions. And so I just sort of spent 12 years kicking around and playing around with it. So it's about this method, the me method, the make everything easier method, where you use the emotions to basically invite the brain to do what it likes to do, pile on, and give every reason you can imagine of why you're overwhelmed or mad or whatever emotion is in that section. And then you use that to get into the body.
Mhm.
And when we're in the body, we help the body tell us the story of the first time this feeling, let's say we go through anxiety and it's like, oh, I feel it in my chest. I feel it like I'm going to throw up. And so you lean into that feeling. It's all about validation. Validate. How can you validate and get past the guards that are set up early on to never feel that way again and get to feel it, validate it, and then go back and save that person, that version of yourself from doing the task that they completed. Go, look at me. You did it. I'm all grown up. I've got kids. I've got this job. You survived and you are amazing and I love you and you're the best part of me. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to come back sooner, but you are off the hook. Can you hand this big job with keeping me safe or whatever it is so you can go back to being a kid? And so that internal resistance, right? That when we say,
Mhm.
why am I still working on the same issue? That's the beginning. And you let it
Mhm.
off the hook and you read it a story, you put it to bed, you bring it into the light of your heart. And you're like, we're partners now. You get to keep what you learned, but you're no longer responsible. You can just go run and play and become you. And so you reparent, sort of.
Mhm.
You take on that responsibility. So the me method came about because I did this with hundreds of people and they kept saying in one way or another, well, it just got easier. I'm like, oh, it just got easier. You did some pretty amazing stuff,
Mhm.
right? And so that's why the title was in honor of everybody going, oh, it just got easier. It's not easy. It gets easier.
Yeah, it will get easier and continue to get easier as time goes on, but there's going to be points where it's not going to be easy. There are points where the past is going to come back and we're going to start ruminating over that a little bit, but then it's just going back to the skills that you've taught them, whether it be one-on-one, in group, or through your book, that will help get them regrounded and refocused
Yeah,
and realize that the true gifts that they possess, and realize that, maybe what they did when they were at a younger age was the best they could have done given the hand of cards that were dealt to them. And it helps them show some grace to themselves.
absolutely. And that usually happens, but we never do it like talking because, we can go, I understand it. And then 5 minutes later, get sucked back in. By
Hmm.
going into the body, it's so beautiful because the shift happens in them. They do it.
Yeah.
They do it.
And I think having insight that a behavior needs to change doesn't necessarily mean the behavior is going to change. There's going to have to be some specific skills that or coping skills or techniques or strategies that are taught to individuals that can help make that insight, turn that
Mhm.
insight into palatable behavior that is going to allow them to achieve their goals and to engage in life more proactively, more joyfully, and more genuinely.
Mhm. Mhm. The cool thing I would say about EFT, with or without the me method, is that part where we have to preload and help a person understand, some of that is minimized because when you're no longer battling against the part of you in survival mode or making those choices to survive, because when you're a kid, what resources do you have except for trading yourself in one
Hmm.
way or another?
Hmm.
Um, it just like stops happening. And all of a sudden they show up and all of a sudden they're able to speak their voice or set a boundary or at least fumble around with the idea. And that's the part where it's like, well, the impossible Like the idea's there, but it was impossible. And now all of a sudden I just did it without white knuckling it or putting some methodology at work that I forget. And then I go, oh, okay, I need to do a count to 10 or whatever. It's remarkable.
Yeah, particularly with the type of techniques with EFT and other in meditation and other things, other practices that you teach to individuals or you expose individuals to, they have such an almost immediate therapeutic effect, and that's where I believe you don't see that with traditional Western therapy. And I was a therapist for a long time, and the changes are incremental. So when you're looking at an integrative approach where there's complementary versus evidence-based or science-based, the results I think are just so much more profound, so much more instantaneous, and I think they end up proving to be more long-lasting and cost-effective as well too.
Yeah. Well, and then think about, so you're a therapist and I do my thing, see people. What does that also do for the therapist or the coach?
It certainly elevates their self-esteem, their feelings of self-efficacy, because especially with beginning therapists, they take failure personally. And I had a great deal of difficulty detaching from the outcomes of my clients, and particularly with individuals with addiction. I learned very quickly that one bite at the treatment apple doesn't necessarily do the trick. There might be multiple treatment events that before the individual decides they're going to embrace sobriety. And sometimes the best treatment that we do is actually preparing an individual for another treatment episode by laying the groundwork for that. And so you measure success very differently. But with complementary techniques, I think you see almost immediate effects that I think can't be disputed. So,
Well, but then it also helps you carry that hope brighter. Whereas when you're trying, you're all gung ho and you're going to go save the world, and then you see that it's challenging and that you will lose, that can start to make a person protect themselves, right? Dim their light a little and show up a little more cynically, which I think, being realistic has a lot of merit as well. But that for me, I'm like, it is a miracle. Here we go again. Like, to be able to live in that miracle is a true gift.
Absolutely. And I think that increases our gratitude for life every day when we can live that miracle every day.
Yeah.
We are running close to being out of time for today. We could talk probably for about another hour or two. So, but one of my last questions for you is, if you're going to leave our listeners with one thing today, what would that be?
So many things. I would say this is kind of a two-part one thing. One, it's valid if you're feeling it. Doesn't matter what anyone else is saying. If you're feeling it, into your perspective, it's valid and it probably makes sense. And feeling something else would probably be weird. So giving yourself permission to be where you are is so important. And sending yourself love. Sending yourself love. This maybe really sucks right now. And I feel sad about it. And I don't know any way out. And it's okay to feel that way, because that is how I'm feeling. And I get to have my feelings. And the second part is, you don't have to stay stuck. Trust the urge to get curious about some of the stuff in the world, whether it's EFT, pick up a copy of the book if it resonates with you. But there are other people doing incredible things too with all of these energies, and give yourself that little push into the unknown, because you really don't have to suffer as long as we've historically been told we have to suffer.
Absolutely. And we have a choice in terms of how we choose to live our life or co-create our reality in conjunction with the universe, and don't let anybody take the power of that choice away from you.
No, you get to be you.
Absolutely. And being who you are is okay in my book, because everybody has their own unique gifts and talents and They all contribute to a better world. My last question for you is: if people want to get in touch with you, they want to contract for your services, purchase your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
startyourbetterlife.com. Everything's there that you need to get a hold of me. There's links to the books, more information, and startyourbetterlife.com.
And I will make sure that gets in the program notes when it's released on audio and when it's released on YouTube. Whitney, thanks so much for spending time with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was a great extension, I think, of our pre-chat.
Definitely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And anytime you want to have a cup of coffee and chat, let's do it.
I'm all for that. And particularly, I don't need an excuse for coffee. Anytime you want to have coffee, we'll do it. So thank you again, Whitney. With that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.